So it's a delight to be here in real life, actually. My name is Suzi Murtagh, and close to me, socially distanced, is my peer, my colleague and my partner in crime, Ross Eley. We are both directors in Claims Tech Solutions in Allstate Northern Ireland. And we're here to give you a bit of insight into our world. We're going to give you an insight into, over the next 30 to 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, we'll give you an insight into the scale, the complexity in which we live. Allstate's quite huge. And how we're trying to bring to life simple, modern and digital experiences in that world of complexity. And first and foremost, from even listening to Rachel, full disclosure, Allstate is absolutely massive and it's very old. We are not a startup. Allstate is around 90 years old, so we are far from a startup. But we still have to behave like a startup. We still have to make sure that we deliver features and services and products out into production incrementally. We have to do it fast, and we have to do that to satisfy our customers' expectations and desires, as well as meeting our business needs. So I'm going to set the scene here to give you an idea of how complex we really are. And I would take a bet that your world is not as complex as our world. And to talk a little bit around the complexity of, I'm going to talk a little bit about scale of Allstate. So Allstate is a household name. We sell insurance. We're based in the US, and if we were over in the US now, we would recognise that as a household name, a household brand. It's on the TV, it's on billboards, sports events, all of that good stuff. And we have 16 million customers, so we have a huge customer base. And to put that into proportion, that's like everyone in Northern Ireland. Everyone in Northern Ireland, children and all, have been an Allstate customer, and then multiplying that by 9. So we do have a huge customer base, but we also are a huge organisation. So we're a global organisation. We're based here in Northern Ireland, also in the States and in India. And there's actually 40,000 of us, 2 of which is myself and Ross, and we're the Allstaters. And that's quite a big world, right? We have a world of different organisations and capabilities within Allstate itself. Like, help me out, Ross, here, but we obviously have technology, we have data, we have actuary, we have finance, marketing, underwriting, people who sell products, we have claims adjusters, we have a massive world. And just to put it into context, if Allstate was like the House of Fraser around the corner, our world that we're going to talk about now and the complexity is merely a concession stand on the ground floor, because our world is the claims area. I quite like to think that we are the nice concession stands, like we're selling the perfume or the makeup, because what we do then is that we're selling products, but we also try and create a fantastic customer experience as we do that. In our world, when something has happened with one of our customers, something traumatic has happened, the flooding in their house or a car crash or something like that. So we have a chance to satisfy our customer in their time of need. So hopefully I've kind of set the scene of some numbers of the size, and remember as well the size of what we're talking about in our experiences. There's a backdrop to even a bigger world. But today we're going to talk about our world, which is the claims organisation.
Yep, thanks, Suzi. I think Suzi did a good job at trying to scare everybody there, and I'm going to try and do a bit of the same. So, like Suzi said, the organisation that Suzi and I are responsible for is the claims organisation. And I'm going to talk about it today and split it into 3 different pillars: people, process, and technology. So from a people perspective, like Suzi said, there's 16 million customers, so it's a huge customer base. And in order to service those customers, we have 15,000 claim handlers. And those guys are split across the US and India, and they're responsible for taking that initial contact of the claim, doing some investigation for the customer, evaluating the claim and settling the claim, and ultimately getting our customers either back on their feet after an accident or back to some sort of normality. In addition to that, Suzi and I are directly responsible for our engineering and product people, and which is a large group that's based here. It's based in 3 shores. It's based in the US, in India, and a large portion is based here in Northern Ireland. And part of their role is to support the systems that those claim handlers use, and also to drive some of the new technology that we're going to touch on today. So moving on to the processes, you can just imagine that the sheer number of people that we have and the number of processes that need to be in place to support those. And a lot of it is around labour arbitrage and getting work to the right claim handler. So there's different components of the claim, and it's all about moving, these business processes are all about moving work as tasks to different claim handlers. On top of that, what that makes it kind of complex, makes it super complex, is the different channels that we have to communicate with our customer, and our customer can communicate with us. So we have text, email, we have fax, we have physical letters, we have web clients and native apps. And one of our biggest customer interactions and engagements is voice. And to give you again the size of the voice interactions, we have 35 million calls every single year, which equates to roughly about 100,000 calls a day. So it's huge. You can just to have processes in place to communicate with our customers is huge. Last but most certainly not least, I'm going to talk about the tech part of the house, and this is where complexity tends to manifest itself. So Suzi and I are responsible for around 300 applications, and those applications are a mixture of ones that our claim handlers use, some UIs and production support tools. And those applications have been there for quite a long time. Like Suzi said, Allstate's a really old company. It's 90 years old. So that ecosystem has built up over many years. And what's occurred is this coupling or tight coupling between products, which is what's breeding complexity. So if you try and make a change in one product, it actually impacts 3 or 4 products. So a simple change can become a complex change really quickly, and can actually need coordination as well, not just that it's a difficult change. To add kind of even more complexity to that, some of our applications have an age range of between 35 years old, I think it's the oldest one, which was built using assembler and COBOL, and I'm sure some of you here remember, right up to products that were delivered a couple of weeks back using, that were deployed and built in the cloud and are using cutting edge AI and machine learning technology. So you can see there's a massive disparity even between that. So what that causes is when these products need to communicate with each other, you tend to have to put a layer in between, which again adds to the complexity of it. So as well as the products that Suzi and I look after, we also interact with over 200 external products, and that could be external to our area, but also external to Allstate. And that adds another factor of complexity, because now you have an outside factor that can actually impact your own ecosystem. And again, these are products that have been purchased and built for years, so they're generally tightly coupled together. The other thing that I want to kind of touch on, because these applications are so old, the architecture patterns are completely different. So you'll find that a product that was built 30 years ago uses an architecture pattern that's completely different to how we architect our products today. And when those two architecture patterns are trying to interact with each other, they're not always complementary. And generally, it will cause you to create, again, a middle layer in between the two, which adds to the complexity. So I've kind of touched on those 3 pillars, but I want to put a bit of like a real life scenario context to it. So if you can imagine if you guys were an Allstate customer and you had an accident yesterday, the first thing that you do is that you call 1-800-ALLSTATE, and one of those 15,000 claim handlers will pick up the call, and they'll take you through each step of that claims process using those business processes that are in place, and they'll be leveraging those applications that I talked about in order to resolve your claim. So I'm gonna hand it over to Suzi again here for her to talk to you a wee bit about what we're trying to deliver and what we're trying to bring to life.
Yeah, so hopefully you guys are following us in regards to setting the scene, in regards to that scale and size. And we also need to add in then our challenges today, because what we are bringing to life, which hopefully we'll explain to you guys now, is a seamless digital experience. And it's not greenfield, right? We don't have a separate group of engineers or leaders trying to build this experience in parallel to our existing world. We're doing it all as one. So our existing teams are doing it within our existing ecosystem. And I think it's important to try and understand what we're trying to bring to life. So what we are trying to do, instead of that phone number and that claimant experience, we're creating and blowing up our digital front doors. And that basically means we're creating a seamless digital experience for our customers so that they can record and manage and get resolution systematically and automatically with a little bit of maybe human touch, but low-level human touch. And if I go through an experience, maybe Ross, you can couple in that kind of technology that, you know, this isn't a strategy that we're just trying to look. This is what we're living and breathing today in our world. We're trying to bring this to life. So if I was coming down to St. George's Market in the car, I had an accident, minor accident. I know I have an event to do, so I'm a bit ruffled. I get to take photographs of the damage. It's minor. I store all that on my phone. I come to the event, and then in my own time, I am able to record the accident in my words, almost like a voice note, on my mobile, and able to send that to Allstate. It's on my terms, it's my conversation, it's my language, and it's in my time.
Yeah, so how we're doing that, and the reason why we're doing it is to try and eliminate those follow-up phone calls, a lot of those communications. So the technology that we're putting behind that is, first of all, like voice-to-text transcription. So as you're speaking into your voice note, we're firing that off and transcribing it real time so that the customer can see that feedback, so that they know that we're capturing the information that they're telling us. So it's adding that kind of comfort level to them. And from an Allstate perspective, we're also able to mine that data and use that to drive, slicker business processes in the background.
So once I've sent that file note off to you, or the voice note, off to you, then I'm able to interact with my mobile, using my mobile, some added content, and the experience that I've done that when I've gone home, I'm having a cup of coffee and I'm interacting with my mobile app and able to have a conversation and be able to give further information. And that conversation is sympathetic. It knows that what I have been through, and I feel as if I am talking to a human being in a real life conversation and providing those different elements of the accident and what occurred at that time.
Yeah, so this is what we've found out via research. So as we're on this journey, we find that our customers want that human feel and that human kind of interaction that they're missing in a digital experience. So what we've applied here is, again, some cognitive services, similar to some chatbots that you would see in help desks today, where you're letting the customer know that they've been heard, and you're also prompting them for additional information from an Allstate perspective. So that way we know that we can get the information that we need, and we're also making sure that we're adding that human element into the interaction, the digital interaction.
Yeah. And then probably the final step then is to be able to supplement my claim by adding in those photographs that I took that are sitting on my camera roll to my claim. So I'll be uploading photographs of the damage to the car, of the driver's license, the other passenger's driver's license, and things like that.
Yeah, so this is where we're removing those follow-up calls again, where you're trying to gather additional information. So if you take the photos, the damage photos, for instance, we're using photo models to identify points of impact and damage, and we're going to use that to assess and estimate how much your damage is going to cost to repair. And then for things like proof of insurance and driver's license, like Suzi mentioned there, we're using optical character recognition to pull that information out so that we don't have someone looking at it and entering the information in somewhere else. So we're systemically pulling that information. So that I'm hoping that gives you an idea of the direction that we're going and how we're trying to simplify that complex world that we described. I genuinely believe that we've two big challenges ahead of ourselves. One is we have to coexist and cohabit with the systems that we have today. We don't have the luxury of starting greenfield, so we do have to coexist with existing systems. And then probably the biggest challenge is what we're describing here isn't just a technology shift, it's a completely different business model or different business paradigm. And that requires us to be really mindful that as we're building these digital products, that we're actually modifying and enhancing the business processes as we do it in parallel. So I think, Suzi, you're going to, although we've kind of covered what we're doing, I think Suzi's going to tell us what we're doing about it and how we started on our journey.
Yeah, and I think just to give you that background of our world, it's overwhelming for us, in regards to this is our life, this is what we come to work every day, but it's quite exciting as well. And to create a simple digital experience in a current ecosystem that's aged and complex, and there's a lot there, can be overwhelming. But as I say, that we're on that journey. We're in the middle of it, and there are some things that, if you too are in this type of journey, or at least even from a small company perspective, understand how you don't introduce complexity maybe in the future as well. These are some of the things that I certainly have learnt and would, preach about, I suppose, a little bit. One of the first things then is map it out. Understand your current state of systems and processes as it is today. Map it out so that it makes sense to you and it makes sense to your junior hire that you have just hired 2 weeks ago. Attrition is just going to get more and more as we go through. Great opportunities, but the reality is, you shouldn't be turning to your most senior or tenured person in the room to give you an understanding of what current state looks like. And I don't want to be prescriptive in how you would do that. It all depends on your company and your business, but there are many ways that you could do that through systems, processes, product designers, process engineers, product managers. You could even get a graphic designer in for a week to map it out. And the point is, it doesn't really matter how you do that, as long as that remains a simple current state of where you are today. And that allows you to take ambiguity out of any decisions that you're making moving forward. And I feel that is a fundamental. The next one is roadmaps. And we all have products that have roadmaps. And I'm a huge advocate for, of course, every product, it's a given, should have a roadmap, but not just to provide features of the next 12 months or problems that you're solving for the next 12 months, but also be committed to incrementally shutting down features and removing code as you go. It is quite easy to, and I'll be totally honest, nearly every roadmap that I do view and see is all about bringing these things to life, and the celebration is about bringing features and to production for our customers to see. But we don't talk about the things that need to be removed, and we need to make sure that everyone has accountability and ownership of that. And for me, if that sits within a roadmap where when you're bringing up features and you're also retiring them at the same time, that's a great sense of accountability, and you're cleaning up as you go. The other two then, I have an example, I suppose. The other two points that I would have is around being opportunistic. You have your roadmap, but don't let that be dictative of where you're exactly going. Be opportunistic to the market and the environment to where you are, and take advantage of that. And believe in, I'm a huge believer in diverse and lean teams. Just what Rachel was saying before in her talk. We are a large organisation, but to get things done, I think you should look to a diverse team of a small team. And the example that we can give here now is something that happened just only a couple of weeks ago, actually, where Hurricane Ida hit over in the US. So it was quite disruptive, right? You've all seen it on the news. And it had severe consequences to people's homes. There was a lot of flooding, and at one point there was around 2 million people out of power. And that hits our world. So actually what happens in those scenarios, in those storm events, is there's a bit of a lull before, because the people have moved out of the storm's way. And then once the storm has passed, they come back to their homes, their cars, they assess the damage, and then they start to phone us to dial in or start to file their claim. And at that point, probably a couple of days after Hurricane Ida had started, we've seen huge volumes coming through on our phones, our 1-800 number, and our existing process that we rely on today. So we did see an opportunity and a problem, and we brought a small group of people together across the company. So we brought engineers. Help me out here, Ross. We had engineers. We had voice engineers.
Product people. I think we have my account for banners to notify and drive people to digital. Yep. Lots of things, yeah.
So we had a lot of people who were, and a small group but diverse people, particularly just business and technology working together to solve that problem. And over 2 days then, we had put in some IVR voice rewritten over to our digital channel, which we spoke about there. So we were getting customers through and pushing them through on their choice through to our digital and processing a claim digitally. So we had that, and we also had the banners. So over that period of time, we were able to reduce the phone calls and actually get a lot of customers to our new digital experience at the same time. And that was just an opportunity. We hadn't planned for that. It was a problem that we've seen. So whilst the roadmaps are, super important and needed, don't let a good opportunity stand in your way to push you along. Ross, maybe over to you with your OCD.
Yeah, so Suzi did the fundamentals, covered the fundamentals that you need in place when you're on these transformational journeys. And we're trying to depict my OCD here, because you need to be mindful, when you have all those fundamentals in place, you need to be mindful of actually how you build software and how you implement software. And this is where my OCD kicks in. And I like to live by the mantra of keep a clean and tidy house. And essentially all I mean is when you're coding, make sure your code's clean, make sure your architecture patterns are clean, and just make sure you've got clean, simple solutions. That's kind of the mantra that we try and instill, in our engineers. And along the way, we're still on the journey. Along this way, I'm going to try and give you some nuggets of wisdom that we've come along with. And the majority of them are common sense. They're just not really common practice some of the time. So to kind of kick it off, guiding principles is one thing that we've found really, really useful on this journey. And by guiding principles, it can be anything. It can be patterns architecture patterns that you want to adhere to, anti-patterns that you don't, when to use certain database types, when to use certain message platforms. It's really just guidelines and guiding principles that you want to give your product teams so that there's consistency in how they're developing and implementing software. And that's what we're doing and what we're finding really, really useful as part of this new journey, because the products are able to communicate them with each other much, much easier. Another one, which is probably the most important one, which is stay on top of your tech debt. Technical debt can mount up super quick, and if you don't kind of make sure that you prioritize it, it will soon become problematic and actually a blocker to where you're trying to go, or your strategic solution. So what we're doing as part of this journey, we're obviously shutting down a lot of things and replacing a lot of things. We're just making sure as we go along that journey, to Suzi's point, we're deprecating it and we're cleaning it up and leaving it better than we found it. Another one that's kind of overlooked, but we're pushing for it here at Allstate is to make sure you're using the right tools to solve the right problem. A lot of big companies and small companies tend to use the technologies that's available to them and not necessarily the right technology to solve the problem. So the journey that we're on is we're trying to empower our engineers so that they don't get put in a situation where you've got a square peg, round hole situation where you can make it work, you can certainly make it work, but what you'll end up doing is building something additional to cater for limitations in the technology that you've chosen. So we're empowering our full stack engineers. We're making sure that they have the ability to make sure that they're selecting the right software to solve the problems. And then the other one I would say I kind of touched on is dependencies. Don't build unnecessary dependencies. So when I look back at the ecosystem that we currently have, the products are very dependent on each other. So when you're making your new kind of product suite, ensure that any dependencies that you're building in, that they're soft dependencies, they're not hard ones, so that you can release code independently and that you don't have this massive ripple effect that I mentioned earlier. And that's what we're doing on this new journey. We're making sure that we're using architecture patterns like microservice and event-driven architecture patterns that allow us to do that. And then finally, something that, again, it's something that's overlooked, especially in larger organizations, I would say, is the engineering mindsets to build everything. But what we're trying to do is make sure that we're asking the question, should we build this or should we buy it? Because it can actually help simplify your ecosystem, because what you're doing is essentially outsourcing some of your complexity. And that's what we've done on the journey so far. We've leveraged some of the Microsoft products around our cognitive service suite, which is doing a really good job for us.
Thanks. So as a roundup, I think Ross and I doing this presentation have been able to reflect on the things that we're doing, actually things that we should take forward and things that we haven't done in the past. So Ross, being an engineer, coming from an engineer background, what would you say to yourself even 5 years ago? What would your advice be to yourself?
I'd probably have a lot of advice, Suzi, but I'll kind of keep it short. First one's just code clean and simple. I remember when I was an engineer, you kind of tend to try fancy things. Simple's key, and that's kind of what I've learned over the years, is just keep it simple. Another one is around, the push for tech debt. Time to actually from an engineering seat. As an engineer, we don't tend to push for time to actually resolve technical debt, but that's something that I know that if you don't, it will actually lead to more work, in the future. And then lastly, probably more of a personal thing is I would tell myself to be okay with making mistakes. I think as an engineer, sometimes you try and get perfection first off, and I think you just need to have a growth mindset and make sure that when you're making mistakes, you just learn from them. So I think it's more important about being comfortable making mistakes. What about yourself, Suzi? What about when you look back as a product manager? What would you tell yourself?
Yeah, same as you, Ross. Probably a lot of things, but a couple of fundamentals is, keep everything simple. I know we're talking about ecosystems and code, but simple in regards to communication, strategy, user stories. Don't get enamored with complexity, and actually challenge complexity every day. Don't take it for granted. Even things like goals, like how many of us have goals, KPIs or whatever that are too complex to even measure. Keep it simple across the board. And I would challenge everyone here who's listening today to, not to be thinking of this as just a big enterprise problem. Everyone in their seats here today is looking for more customers, more data, more traffic, more and more. And, when was the last time that we did sunset anything in our ecosystem or even delete a bit of data? I think the mindset is to grow technology, and we need to have that shut down at the same time. And that would be another thing as well. My roadmaps in the past as a product manager have not included shutting down other features that are now redundant, or even business operations that remain redundant. And I would encourage myself in the past to roll up my sleeves and get into the depths of that, rather than just thinking of the shiny new things that we're creating. So much so I would even celebrate it. I think I would have retirement parties. I would have celebrations for actually celebrating those wins, which is cleaning up and incrementally keeping things nice and clean and tidy.
Yep, great.
So I think that's us.
Yep, that's us.
Great stuff. Don't go anywhere. Suzi, Ross, I've got a couple of quick questions, one for each of you. Suzi, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Do you think there is a language problem here? I know when I work with my clients and I talk to them about keeping things simple, or when I use the word simple, what people often hear is easy, not great. They just think simple must be easy. But actually, simple's really difficult, isn't it? So do you think there's a language problem?
Gosh, I can certainly say from our large organisation that as human beings, I think we tend to have our own language. Even in Allstate, we have 3-letter acronyms for probably 5 things, 5 different things. And I think we tend to have that language as something that connects us, perhaps, but I would challenge that. I challenge that for the amount of people that are coming in new, the rotation in our organisation, to simplify it and to have a common language. Like, if you're talking about the Northern Ireland kind of language and how we speak, is that what we were talking about?
No, just generally.
In general.
So, I'm in marketing, and I know I push and push and push for one-page documents.
Yeah.
And I present one-page documents to clients, and often you hear that, is that it? And you're like, well, what do you want? Do you want 60 pages because it sounds more complex? But the simplicity involved in delivering a one-page or in boiling it down is actually really difficult. I think it was Voltaire who wrote, apologise for writing such a long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one, which kind of captures the fact that simplifying is really, really difficult, isn't it?
It is so hard, and that's, I think, my final comment as well. We talk about simplifying our ecosystem and being accountable and making sure that we don't have that waxy layers. But it also goes back down to our language. We're a global company. We need to make sure that we're inclusive in our language as well, and simplifying it, and that we're not excluding people in the complexity of language. And I think the simplicity, no matter what we do, is my mantra. but it's hard. Even this presentation, we've got so much information to try and get something succinct and simple. It's hard. It takes more work. It definitely does.
Definitely. And just one quick one for you, Ross. You mentioned about using the right tool for the right problem. Do you think that people just use the wrong tool because it's easy and they know how to do it, so they don't have the on-ramp of new learning?
Yeah, there's a few things. Sometimes it's accessibility. So sometimes it's just what's available to you. So it's not necessarily that they don't want the upskill or can't upskill. It's just that's the only technology that's available to them. But there is that other element of it's something that they know, so it's their comfort, and they don't want to kind of deviate from what they're comfortable with. And that's something that we are trying to really enforce with our full-stack engineers. Yep.
Excellent stuff.
Thank you.
Excellent. A round of applause, please, for Ross
Thanks,
and
folks.
Suzi. Thank you.